Now, to get some more clues on exactly where North Korea, the U.S., and South Korea stand regarding the nuclear issue, sanctions, and to take a look at what might happen next, we now connect to Professor Kim Hyun-wook from the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Thank you so much for your time, Professor Kim.
Thank you very much.
Let's first touch upon the big announcement from the U.S. on sanctions. The U.S. has sanctioned 2 Chinese shipping companies linked to helping North Korea evade sanctions. And one South Korean vessel named Lunis has also been named as one of the suspicious vessels believed to be engaged in ship-to-ship transfers with North Korean tankers. What's your take on the announcement and why does it come now?
I think after the Hanoi summit's broken, the U.S. is taking a very harsh and hardline policy towards North Korea. Of course, after the Hanoi summit, Secretary Pompeo and Secretary Advisor Bolton mentioned that the U.S. is open for a talk with North Korea. But after a while, U.S. is in fact bolstering its sanctions on North Korea and China. It thinks that still there exists a loophole in sanctions on North Korea, especially between North Korea and China. Even though Chinese central government argues that it is abiding by the United Nations sanctions very well, but still U.S. thinks that the loopholes exist, and in order to block the loopholes, it wants to be more seriously implement the sanction measures on North Korea. So this is not a good signal to North Korea. Maybe if sanctions gets tougher, Kim Jong-un might change its thinking and posture and come back to the table, but we are not sure what would be the outcome of these sanctions hardened on North Korea.
What do you think is happening now at North Korea's Dongchang-ri missile launch site? We've been hearing reports of signs of North Korea restoring its main launch site that was partially disassembled following leader Kim Jong-un and U.S. President Trump's summit in Singapore last year. How do you assess North Korea's intentions and the possibility of another provocation?
After the summit's broken, Choi Sun-hee, who is the Vice Minister of Foreign Ministry in North Korea, had a press conference in Pyongyang, in which she mentioned that the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is now considering seriously about whether to continue the moratorium of nuclear and missile test. This is a kind of measures to pressure the United States change its posture towards North Korea, and at the same time there were some moves of Dongchang-ri missile launch site, some signals that they are making the launches of missiles ready to be launched soon. But I think this was just for the purpose of pressuring the United States. We know what happens if North Korea shoots missiles or satellites. After that happens, I think the U.S. will be much more harsh towards North Korea. So I don't think North Korea wants to risk all that kind of possibilities. Maybe this time, currently, I don't think the possibility of real launching its missiles, North Korea launching its missiles, would be very high. So I think this is just for the purpose of pressuring President Trump.
Well, North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly is set to meet on April 11th to hold its first parliamentary session with the newly elected deputies. Some experts believe that North Korea might launch a rocket marking the day, but you don't think that will happen then, do you?
No, I don't think so. Of course, there are some future scenarios we can think about. First scenario is to have this kinds of stalemate continue for a while. North Korea and the U.S. not seriously talk, but does not want to, break the frame of dialogue between two countries. That's the most plausible scenario, I think. The second scenario is what if they become harsh towards each other? What if the U.S. bolsters its sanctions on North Korea? And what if, in response to that, North Korea launches its missiles or launches its, satellites, things like that? I think if that's the case, things will be much harsh. The Korean Peninsula situation will be really, really bad. That will be the scenario we are worrying about. That is still possible, but if the Kim Jong-un is a rational actor, I don't think this kind of risk is something that he would like to choose. Of course, there is a third scenario, which means that two countries come back and talk and come up with a peace deal. But I don't think the possibility of peace deal for now is very, very low.
So North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is likely to be cautious for the time being. Now, one of the main reasons behind the failure of the Hanoi summit was Washington's skepticism on North Korea's will to completely denuclearize. Some reports are going as far to assert that North Korea possesses a secret uranium storage facility that's away from Yongbyon. I know this is a tough question, but could you give us some clues on North Korea's possible nuclear facilities and nuclear storage?
This kinds of skepticism came from the United States. Some intelligence agencies and also some think tank in the Washington D.C. Rise this possibility that the North Korea is possessing another uranium enrichment facilities, production facilities somewhere around Pyongyang. I think one thing that the maybe Security Advisor Bolton proposed to the Kim Jong-un in Hanoi was the possibility that North Korea was possessing this kinds of facility. President Trump mentioned in his press conference also that when United States pinpointed the location of this secret production facility, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was very much surprised. But I don't think, Kim Jong-un does not know that the U.S. was knowing this kind of secret site of North Korea. But anyway, I don't think this is the real reason that the deal was broken. I think the real reason is that, North Korea was just, limiting the denuclearization issue only to the Yongbyon facilities, which was totally different from the U.S. expectation at the time.
Which leads to our next question. South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa said Thursday that at the Hanoi summit, the U.S. demanded a freeze of the North's weapons of mass destruction, not a dismantlement of nuclear weapons. How do you interpret her remarks?
I think she's looking at the big picture of denuclearization. Of course, the U.S. Wants some initial process of denuclearization. According to the U.S. positions, what U.S. wanted first was to agree upon the definition of denuclearization with North Korea, and secondly, go for the freeze of nuclear production and missile production of North Korea. And the last one was to come up with a roadmap how two countries, especially the North Korea, would eventually achieve denuclearization. But within this kinds of three-step big picture, I think what still the United States still wanted at that time in Hanoi was to come up with the dismantling of Yongbyon facilities. The U.S. cannot just leave Hanoi without any kinds of measures of denuclearization. Any promises by Kim Jong-un should be obtained by the United States. So I think what Kang Kyung-hwa, Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa was mentioning was kind of big picture issue. But when you narrow down the denuclearization issue, which is related to the Hanoi summit, I think the U.S. definitely wanted the dismantlement of Yongbyon facilities.
And North Korea and the U.S. also show different opinions on lifting sanctions. Washington argues that Pyongyang demanded complete sanctions relief, while Pyongyang argues it only demanded the lifting of 5 sanctions that can help ease the lives of its people. How do you assess the future of the two sides' disagreement on sanctions?
Yes, of course. What North Korea wanted was not lifting not all the sanction measures by the United Nations Security Council. What North Korea wanted was only the part of 5 United Nations sanctions, which has been agreed in the United Nations after, I think it was 2016. in which there were fourth and fifth nuclear tests of North Korea. So, yeah, it's right that it's true that North Korea did not demand the entire sanctions to be lifted. But when you look at the contents of the sanctions, for example, which has prohibited the North Korean export issues, prohibited the provision of oil into North Korea, prohibited the North Korean laborers working abroad. All the kind of things that North Korea has requested was pretty much all the issues that was the economic sanctions on North Korea. Now North Korea wants to have sanctions lifted. The reason is that because of sanctions, the economy of North Korea is really bad. And what North Korea wanted in Hanoi, the part of sanctions was pretty much related to the most of the economic sanctions that were portrayed by the United Nations. So both countries' arguments are right, but definitely what is more important is that dismantlement of Yongbyon facilities and five United Nations sanctions to be lifted, which was requested by North Korea. I don't think these are identical. I don't think the deal cannot be made with these things to be swapped.
Now to inter-Korean relations following the failed summit. Every Friday, the two Koreas have held a meeting through the Joint Liaison Office. But the meetings have been on hold for 4 consecutive weeks, with North Korea yet to respond to South Korea's request for talks. Could this be a sign of worsening inter-Korean relations following the summit?
I don't think this is a worsening. I would say this is just a North Korea pressuring South Korea. Choi Sun-hee, the vice minister, when she had a press conference in Pyongyang, she mentioned that the South Korea is not an arbitrator, not facilitator, but a player in the same front with the United States, which means that the North Korea is very much dissatisfied with South Korea and complaining about South Korea because South Korea is not, doing a major economic cooperation with North Korea because of the sanctions measures by United Nations and the United States. So what North Korea wants is that, okay, South Korea, you just ignore the United Nations and come up with the North-South detente and economic cooperations. And these kinds of issues not meeting at the, Kaesong Joint Liaison Office issues, this is still a, signal that is pressuring South Korea to begin and come up with the North-South economic cooperation more seriously.
So the inter-Korean relations are not exactly worsening, but rather we should take it as North Korea pressuring South Korea to play a bigger role as a mediator. Thank you so much for your insights today, Dr. Kim.
Thank you very much.